Okay, so I haven't yet done a video for my actual marathon, which I finished yesterday. Yeah, you might have noticed that the scenery's changed. I moved, like, the week before the marathon. That was ridiculous and not really something I ever want to do again. So, we took the high-speed rail from Taipei down to Kaohsiung, which is about an hour and a half on the super fast route, which means they only stopped twice on the way down, and spent the night in Kaohsiung before heading out to the marathon track. So the way it's set up, the first 5K is a run out to the loop site, and then the loop site is 2 loops around the site, and then you get 5K back. Now, the 5K out, the first third of it is just like nice, easy, flats, get you warmed up. And then it gets into these hills. And by hills, I mean like serious, like ups and downs and ups and downs. And a lot of it was up. At least it seemed on the way out. Of course, on the way back, it seemed like a lot of it was up too, because mostly it was one big hill, kind of like up and flat and up and up and up, and then down and down and down and down. And like steep, like really steep, like worried a little bit about my ankles kind of steep. It's crazy. So you get out to this area, and it's going to be this big long loop, and you're going to do 2 loops. If you're doing the full marathon, you're doing 2 loops, and you go left. If you're doing the half marathon, you're going to do 1 loop, and you go right. And I have no idea why they didn't switch those. And the reason for this, so you go left, and then there's this long section of flats. Now, my GPS didn't actually work. I'm so angry at my phone, because the Map My Run GPS, it ran for 20 minutes, and then it said, so you've run for 20 minutes. And by run, I mean you've been standing still. I was really irritated by that. But it meant that my phone lasted on 1 battery charge for the entire marathon with my music and my zombies run with no tracking. So whatever. Okay, so you go left, and it's this huge long set of flats. And then about maybe 2/3, maybe halfway through, you end up getting around, and then there's these hills. And the hills were intense, and from everybody I heard from, the hills were intense. Now, I didn't train as much in the hills because I didn't realize that this marathon was going to have this kind of hillage. So the last probably third to half of the loop is just like really intense climbing. Tons and tons of hills. And I don't know why they didn't run it the other way and give you all of the hills in the first part while you were still fresh. And then at the beginning of the second half, or the beginning of the second loop, and let that flat section be the end of each loop when you would theoretically be more tired. I don't know why they didn't run it that way. It seemed really kind of sadistic to run it the other way. But there's not really anything for it. Maybe they just didn't want you to do that massive, massive climb up to the hills, because it was more downhill than uphill, the route that we went. I don't know. I would have run it the other way. I think it would have been a lot better. I think it would have been a better marathon. But it doesn't really matter. So my friend whom I've been training with was about a half an hour to 45 minutes ahead of me by the end. She just squeaked in under the 6-hour mark, and it took me 6.5. They were actually unmanning the stations, and I had a couple of vehicles come past me trying to pick me up on the way back, and they're like, you should get in the vehicle. I'm like, no, I'm running the end of this. Like, you should get in the vehicle. I'm like, no. They're like, nothing's gonna be manned. Like, you're doing this on your own. The last probably 4 rest stops I hit, there were a grand total of 8 rest stops. The last 4 that I hit in the last end, because the 8 rest stops right for a double loop. So the last 4 that I hit, there was nobody there. So I mean, there were bottles of water. So I had stuff, and they all still had whatever they had left for food. So like crackers and some little like Uno bars, which are like nougat with chocolate on the outside, really thin chocolate, which is actually really good. But the salt was gone. I think the salt was gone. And yeah, and I mean, nothing was cold. And they had buckets of water that you just like dump on your head, because I mean, it was 30 plus degrees out. Like it was way over in the 80s Fahrenheit and 30 plus Celsius, and 70% humidity, and it was just intense. Like I was just soaking myself every single stop, like just water all over everything. But I was actually not having as hard a time as my running partner, who was, again, by the end, 45 minutes ahead of me. I was not having nearly as hard a time because I did more training in the morning in the heat than she did. So I at least wasn't like feeling like really weird and shocky. Like she was having like sudden waves of goosebumps, and it was really hard for her. But there were a couple of extra stations that were really nice, especially in the second lap, because one of the unofficial stations where they were like handing out water, because they had water and salt, but they didn't have sport drink, which was, I mean, fine, but one of the unmanned stations in my last lap, my second lap, had sport drink still and water, and they still had ice. That was huge. They had ice. And, you know, when you're looking at 32 degrees Celsius, ice is just the most amazing thing ever. Oh my goodness, it was incredible. The ice. Oh, the ice. But I mean, there were still cool things, like people, you know, I mean, I was obviously one of the last people, and I think I was the last person to actually finish the course. I know there were some people who didn't finish behind me who got picked up by the van. But I think I was the last person to actually finish the course, to actually run it. So, I mean, it was my first marathon. I really don't care. You know, if I'm the last person, at least I finished. I didn't get picked up. I didn't let them pick me up. They were a little bit worried about me. Everybody assumed I was injured or suffering from heat stroke. And I'm like, no, it's fine. It's fine. I'm just not used to the hills. This was way more than I was expecting. It's fine. Just go. My friend who was running ahead of me, she said that she was with a couple of people and they were having the same kind of complaints. Like, I can't believe I'm not finished yet. I can't, like, they were saying that they'd done like half a dozen marathons before, and this was like the slowest they'd ever gone. I think between the heat, I mean, they were Taiwanese, so like the heat shouldn't have been as big a deal. They're used to training in this, but between the hills and anything else, like it was just nuts. Like, it was really hilly. But on the other hand, it means that any other marathon I do will probably feel awesome, and I'm almost certain, should I do another marathon, to have a faster time. So I'm looking at other runs I might end up doing. But I mean, all in all, it was a really great experience, and the head game for the first lap was really hard. But when I finished the first lap, I got this like huge, like giddy feeling at the end of it, where it was just like, oh man, I finished my first lap. Now all I have to do is go, and there's no like, have I gotten there yet? It's just get home. You know, home being the ending spot, but whatever. It was wonderful. Like that feeling halfway through when I hit that halfway mark, that feeling was fantastic, because now I'd gotten past the point where I could like turn around and go back and like just do half of it. Because I mean, I was really struggling through those hills the first time around. At least the second time around, I knew it was coming. I knew what was happening with the hills, and I was expecting it. Yeah, so that's most of the report from my first marathon. If I think of anything else, I might make a second video. But yeah, it was awesome. 6.5 hours. 6.5 hours. It's really, really slow. But you know, I don't care. It's okay. It's totally okay, because I ran a marathon, and I can now say that. I ran a marathon.